Did you all have fun yesterday? Yes. Can you actually remember Fiona starting off the day with a bit of neuroscience? Yes. How unpredictable. Guess what I'm about to start with? There's this thing called the curve of forgetting. And what happens is you learn stuff and it sits in your transient memory. But if you don't go back and get it out and try to use it, it disappears very, very quickly. And it's got nothing to do with how clever you are. It's got everything to do with how much you use what you learn. And for those of you in the room old enough to remember Ruth Wallace, she used what she learned, didn't she, Melville? Yes. So, what we're going to do now is start using what we learned yesterday and through the whole of our lives coming up to this point. With a bit of luck, I won't have to use any of the martial arts. And if it does come to that, just throw chocolate at me. Works every time, according to my husband. I decided to call this presentation A Sporting Chance because it's the true story of a group of not-for-profit directors who faced a really shocking situation. They stood for election to a board with the absolute best intentions of helping the organisation and discovered that they'd just climbed onto a burning platform. Bad things can happen to best boards. But the better boards survive those things. So we'll look through some of the things that they did, some of the decisions they had to make, and we might even use Andrew Donovan's decision framework, hey, or not, as the case may be. And we'll see what your judgment is like, and what are some of the things that you can bring in and contribute around boardroom tables when the going gets tough. Those of you who aren't at tables, when we break for a question, just chat to the people that you can reach with your voice, or the ones whose bottoms you were touching when the questions were wrong. So, situation we have is a sports club that had a team in a professional league. I won't name them, but they're playing in a professional league. They're actually handling quite large sums of money. And yet they're running through an incorporated association structure. They have a volunteer board which is elected by the members, and election and popularity seem to be quite strongly linked. You would not have called them a skills-based board. But once you join the board, you're expected to get the skill. They had very frequent changes in board composition, which sometimes happens in these clubs. They tend to either stick at one end where the same people are on the board forever, or at the other end where the board changes almost every year. And prior to this particular group joining the board, focus had been mostly on sporting success and how the team was doing and who the players were and what the selection was and what was in the league and what was going on in the big leagues, rather than really focusing on the business of running that association. So given what you know, and we'll just do a quick show of hands, if you were asked, would you stand for election to a board like this? Put your hand up if the answer is yes. Good on you. Yeah, good on you too. And you. So we've got about 20 heroes out of 450 people. General Custer stood with less. And of course, we'll get there soon. And of course, for me to be able to tell you this story, somebody did. On joining the board, that person discovered that the board papers were pretty much all reports, all backward-looking talking about what happened last month and what we've been doing, what the results of that were. The meeting papers were very long, very wordy, and usually late, including being tabled on the day of the meeting. I hope this doesn't sound familiar. Does anyone here have papers tabled on the meeting day? Ooh. Do you remember Harrison Ford in Air Force One? Don't be afraid. Be very afraid. Pretty much the same as Mr. Clinton, really. Yes. However, if it works. Meetings were long and fairly unstructured. People would revert back to the old topics before they moved on to after they'd moved on to the next. And it was very hard to know whether there was really a decision or not. And the minutes were really a transcript. Long, full of verbal quotes, and everything attributed to who had said it. Is that safe? No, that is definitely not safe. So, given this, which one of these would you go for first? What would you fix? Because they're all important, and you can't boil the ocean at once. So on your tables, in your groups, quick little conversation. What would you fix first? Who picked fixing the minutes, getting the records straight? Wonderful. Let's have the lady over there in the white shirt. Brave lady. What's your name?
Hi, my name's Geraldine Burgess and I'm from Karratha in Western Australia.
Yay!
I'm a long time minute taker, secretary, and I teach people how to do minutes properly. So I've just been discussing with my team the fact that the person who's in charge of the board is the secretary of the bold. It's not
she who writes the minutes runs the company.
Yeah. So if you change the way the minutes look, you then influence how the reports are written, which in turn helps to determine how long it's going to take to run the meeting, and you stop this business of who said what, because the minutes should tell you exactly what happened at the meeting without any details. So you can't blame me when I said whatever it was that I said, okay? Because we act as a board and the minutes reflect the personality of the board as a complete entity, not a bunch of individuals.
Thank you, Geraldine. Perfectly correct and good answer. So for those of you who said, yes, that's where I'd start, if there are no decisions recorded in your minutes, guess what? There's no authority for management to act. There's no delegations. There's also no way that you can prove, if it ever comes to court, that you weren't negligent. And yet, if you've got personal quotes, some of you might look reasonably guilty, especially if there's a conflict of interest that hasn't been properly declared and managed, or any one of a number of other issues. So minutes are incredibly important, and it does pay to get them right. Who said number 3, the meeting's long and unstructured? Oh, wonderful. How fast can you run? Let's go for the lady here with the lovely blonde hair in the middle. It was your arm, wasn't it? Not the arm of the lady next to you.
Thank you. My name's Sue. I'm from Carers, Victoria. We chose the agenda because we felt, with all due respect, and I'd absolutely agree with the minutes, but that's kind of retrospective and we've just joined the board. So we thought if we got the agenda correct, that would then inform what the papers look like and how the meeting is run. And also, I guess, what information the board actually wants. And then prior to that, we would also give instruction as to how the minutes should be taken. So that was just kind of the sequence that we put it in.
Excellent. Thank you. And another, and this is the thing, this is why I call what I do directors' dilemmas. because they're different alternative answers. There isn't one that's wrong and one that's right. They're all perfectly logical, and you will do the one that is best for your board based on your knowledge of the company and the people concerned. If you do the one that some consultant tells you, the chances are you'll stuff up. And please don't tell any of the other consultants here today that I said that. I can defend myself, it's all right. You can tell them. Who said number 2? The papers are long and they're frequently late. Oh, there's the gentleman at the back in the cheap seats with his hand up. They did pay less than the ones who got the jug of water and the minties, didn't they? Otherwise, you'll have to share your minties with them, just to make it fair.
I guess for me as a new board member, I'd want to know, all right, what has actually been happening in the organisation, and having papers that are unreadable or not being able to be read due to the time frame is pointless, and it's going to lead to the meetings being long and unstructured because you're just going to have no idea what's going on in the organisation, so you're going to spend most of the time talking about what's been happening rather than what you want to do.
Totally agree. And again, another very good, very valid response. The board of James Hardie really stuffed up. They wound up in court talking about something that was in a paper that may have been tabled at their meeting or may not have been. But it was several pages long, and in theory it was tabled at the meeting, discussed and decided upon, and almost had them go to jail. Almost. Certainly got them fined, it certainly got them banning orders, and it got them onto the front page of the Financial Review for all the wrong reasons. And we do not wish to be there. Not-for-profit companies do not belong on the front page of the Financial Review. I wish they did. It's a little bit more important than money. But if your board papers are late, you cannot possibly demonstrate that you had the time to read them, think about them, seek independent advice, do your own research to place them in context, and then make a responsible decision based upon them. And for those of you who really want to follow the James Hardie affair, it does appear that perhaps the minutes and the agenda were somewhat out of sync as well, which makes it kind of hard to get the right papers at the right time anyway. Who's decided that they would fix the backward-looking nature of the reports? Let's have somebody who's not going to tax my runner quite so much. Oh, over there, gentleman in the short-sleeved shirt. You obviously come from the south somewhere.
First decision you need to make is whether it should be put into administration. You know nothing about it, so you need some up-to-date information, and you just call for that ASAP.
Because if you don't have up-to-date information, you cannot make good decisions. And you just might not be solvent. You might not be all sorts of other desirable things as well. Start wherever you feel is most important to start. You will have reasons for that feeling. Our person decided to attack the board papers first. And he particularly wanted to get a forward look of where are we headed. He had a good look. Sat down with management, worked with them, coached them, prepared budgets, forecast cash flows, looked at what was going on and pushed that out into the future. And discovered a few rather nasty trends. Firstly, the flagship team had been losing. Fans had started to drift away to other teams, so membership numbers had been dropping. Revenue had been dropping, and profit had been dropping with it. management had really done their best to keep the club cash flow positive. So technically, they were still cash flow generating at the time, but the cost cutting wasn't sustainable, and the revenue dropping looked like it might be. So they really needed new revenue streams. They needed to get some money into the club, and pretty fast, because they didn't have what the startups would call a long runway. Think helicopter pad. So what would you focus on first? Some animated discussion going on. Where's my friend Julia with the roving mic? There she is. Julia, how about we pounce unpredictably upon this lovely table in the middle here? And just to be really unpredictable, I don't care what you chose. What I'd like you to share with us is, how did you go about getting the information out of the people around the table to help you make the decision?
I'm not sure how I did that, but I think there were two areas that they were concerned about, well, we were concerned about the team had been losing, but I think we kind of went to membership numbers dropping, and we had decided that if we were able to market the club and increase membership, then you would, from that, and you had more membership, then you would be able to apply more talent and attract better players and try and turn it around that way. So that was a discussion at this table.
So you just very quickly decided to focus on members. Anybody else do the same thing? Yes, no. Who are the yeses?
I have a situation in Newcastle, and members and former members, to give them the opportunity to listen why we've got a problem and listen to what and understand from them what we can do for them. If you get them back as members and they know you're listening, and the staff then lift their morale, it's all those things are needed. But if you don't get the members with you, you'll never get your revenue. And that team players in our organisation, their morale will lift the same as a football side. You know, it's all right to be the Collingwoods of this world and never win a premiership or something, you know, and then you know, the perennial bridesmaids. So you've got to do action with your members and get the revenue in. That way then you can get the good players in. So that's my opinion. I'm sorry about Nathan Buckley and Eddie Maguire, but you can phone a friend.
For those of you that don't come from Victoria, Collingwood is supposedly a football team. And I'm assuming you're not a pie. One of the reasons so many people focused quickly on membership is because it is a members' association. It exists for members. It has no other reason to exist but to serve its members. Collingwood arguably does not exist to win. It exists to provide a community and a sense of unity for its members. And my goodness, does it do that well. You do not find a Collingwood fan who is not a deeply committed Collingwood fan. So remember, your mission is absolutely critical and crucial to your decision making. And so one of the things that people will naturally focus on is going straight to the mission. The no's, quite possibly, focused on, oh my gosh, the runway is so short, we've been told it's a helicopter pad. First things first, better serve the members by making sure they've actually got a club to be members of. Either decision, good idea. You choose. This is the thing with boards. You choose. One of the things that this club then found was that when they started talking about unpalatable truths, management got upset and felt that the board were criticising them. The board, with good reason, asked a few questions about the accuracy of data, and the answers changed a few times. There's a natural tendency at this point to micromanage. Should you give in? No. No matter how much you care, I'm with you, sir. No. As long as you care about the club, you should not ever, from a board, micromanage. Who here's on a board where directors are directors and also volunteers down in the operations? How fast can you run? Somebody get... Do you want to come up here and talk into my collarbone? Okay, I'll come down there and you can talk into my collarbone.
Well, I'm on a couple of boards, but I'm also on a board in Papua New Guinea for the RSPCA. Mm-hmm. So I am the vice president, and I also, because we don't have finance people in the actual organisation, I do that as well.
Mm. Very important. And thank you, Catherine, real hero, volunteering twice for the same organisation. Very important. If you're on a board, you're on the board. And when you step out of that room and you start doing finances, then you're being a volunteer manager. And keeping those roles separate. The good directors manage this well. The bad directors are directors when they're in management and managers when they're in the boardroom. And it's a recipe for disaster. How do we feel about animosity in the boardroom? Time wasting. Yes, there are better things to do with oxygen. However, no board's perfect. Under the pressure, this board decided they were going to make a last-ditch, all-or-nothing, save the club or go down fighting. Shame it wasn't rugby. And they were going to build new facilities, renovate, upgrade the playing surface, get it up to standard, renovate the stands, renovate the hospitality areas, renovate the fitness areas, and open them up so that members of the public and hopefully members of the club would want to come along and use them. And of course, decisions taken in haste are sometimes wrong. And what they found was they did so much renovation that they started to really dangerously disrupt the users of the club. So instead of serving members, they made it more difficult for members to enjoy the things they'd joined the club for. And so profitability and membership declined even more. So here you are, you've made a last-ditch all or nothing, and it's nothing. Should you resign and get off the board at this point? Yes. I like the way you're thinking. Will you be insured if you do? Who would say they'd stay? This is one of the sad things. The better educated directors are taught that at the first sign of approaching insolvency, get off the board and run, and pray that it survives for 6 months after you left. Because, rule of thumb, finger in the air, whatever, you might be okay. They are exactly the sort of educated, well-informed, clever directors that you need in the room if you're going to survive as a not-for-profit organisation. This board, to their credit, closed ranks, and the animosity stopped. When the chips were finally down, they went shoulder to shoulder and went, right, we got into this mess. We have got to get out of it. And we are not going to leave our community without this club. What could have happened to them? Lose their houses? Lose their life savings? Lose their reputations? Get banned, not be able to work at a suitable level to earn it all back again? Of course, the same thing could happen if they'd left. And this is the state they found themselves in. Assets of about 200,000. And yeah, the plant and equipment had to be substantially written down because if you're not a going concern, it's not worth what you think it's worth on your books. And liabilities of about 1.3 million. Are they actually insolvent? Who says yes? Who says no? Are there any economists in the room? Because on the one hand, on the other hand, they're structurally insolvent, but technically, as long as they're cash flow positive and they're meeting their debts as and when they fall due, which they were, it's just that their helicopter pad's getting a bit smaller. So they weren't insolvent yet. And the first thing you need to do when you are in trouble is get some help. You cannot solve a problem with the thinking that created it. Who said that? Einstein. Was he clever? Was he right? Yes, on that one. Shame about the atom bomb. So, quick show of hands. Who would immediately call a lawyer? Gee, lawyers are not popular. Who'd call an accountant? Yep, it's a money problem. An accountant might be a good person. Who'd call a management consultant? Yeah. Your decisions and your management got you in here. Maybe better decisions and better management will get you out. Who'd call an insolvency practitioner? I'm with you guys. If I called the other three, I would be asking them, who do you know who's really good at sorting out insolvency? Quick, whilst I'm still solvent, perhaps. What happens if you decide to wind up a club in this situation? You go into administration or liquidation, you can go into a voluntary members winding up or suspension. But the number one thing is the community lose the club. And what usually happens is the land is the biggest asset. Every other asset just evaporates. And the land is usually only worth what it's worth because somebody will build on it. And they won't build football pitches. They won't build bowling greens. They'll build houses or possibly offices. You might find even with the land sales, and a lot of clubs lease their land. So you might find that even after going into winding up, you haven't got enough to pay everything you owe, which means the board's at risk. What happens if you decide to trade your way out of the situation? Yeah, you're cash flow positive. If you hang in there, what are some of the risks? You don't trade out, you trade further in. And sooner or later, one of those big liabilities is going to come due. Yeah, this is what happened to Centro. A liability came due and they couldn't refinance it in time. If they'd refinanced it in time, we wouldn't know their name. And eventually, when that happens, you'll become insolvent. and the board's at risk. Lose their houses, lose their life savings, lose their reputations. What happens if you go into administration? You don't keep trading, but the club might. And the earlier you go in, the more likely it is that the club will keep trading. Now, I've not taken a not-for-profit through administration. I've turned one around just before it needed it. Technically, structurally insufficient assets, but cash flow positive and a little bit of good management and a little bit of good luck, and we pulled it round. But I have taken a listed company through administration. It's a scary, scary thing because you are still on the board. You are still on the hook wriggling. It's just that the administrator's between you and the fish. The administrator will try to renegotiate your debts. And trust me, you have not seen negotiation skills until you've watched an administrator in action. And the good news is, if they are successful at that renegotiation, you have a chance of survival. And you come out of administration with your debts quarantined, and the administrator puts it all back into your hands so that you can carry on running the company. For those of you who are very fixated on good accounting records, there's usually a horrible black hole where you know what happened and then you went into it and then you know what came out the other end and you have no idea what was in the middle because the administrator doesn't keep records quite like we do. However, and of course, you may still be at risk if the administrator finds you traded for too long, or that you've misrepresented anything, or that you did not work with them. But the good news is, if you work with them, administrators know how to renegotiate debt. They do not know how to run companies. If you work with them, you will get to help them make the decisions that need to be made, so that when with a bit of luck, you come out the other end, you get the company back. And that's what our protagonists did. They called an administrator who stepped in, first of all, checked the asset values, and secondly, verified asset security. This is something that only administrators can really do. But what he found was that a lot of the liabilities weren't correctly lodged, and so they didn't really exist, which was kind of good news for the directors. So their liabilities, you don't want to tick the wrong box on some of those asset security forms. Checked the forecast, made sure that they were on track and that their forecasts and their budgets looked achievable. Consulted a few stakeholders about seeking financial support, but not many. Basically, he went to a few of the high net worth club members and said, would you make a donation? And tried, unsuccessfully, to talk to the people who ran the league to see if they would leave the club in. Unfortunately, in the small print, it says if you go into administration, you're automatically kicked out of the league, so they were kicked out. Now, the board do not twiddle their thumbs. Boards who twiddle their thumbs are not worth the air they breathe. So what the board did whilst the administration was going on was, first of all, they looked for political support. They lobbied their local MP. They lobbied their local council. They lobbied their federal MP. They engaged with the local media about what a wonderful asset the community was likely to lose. They talked to the people in the league, and whilst they couldn't get back in until they came out of the insolvency, they did get an agreement that when they came out, they could immediately apply. And they will be back in the next round of the competition. Which is about as best as you can do. So what happened at the end of it was the existing debts that they had when they went in are now under a separate agreement. They're quarantined and they'll be paid off over time. Maybe not 100%. The administrator took all of the cash and receivables, returned the plant and equipment to the club. The club have to report quarterly to the administrators. just to show that they're on track, that they are trading profitably and well, and they pay a contribution quarterly over the next 5 years, which goes to settling the debts. One of the conditions that the administrator put on the club was that they would recruit skilled directors. So one of the things this board had to do, whilst they were still in administration, was rewrite their constitution to give the board the power to appoint a few skilled directors, just to come in and give them that more independent perspective around the board table. And a lot of people will turn their noses up at professional directors and say, yeah, they're just coming through trying to build their own careers. But actually, I don't care if they build their own careers, as long as they give me plenty of good value for free whilst they're on my board. Call me mercenary. But the outcome was that the creditors were better off. The club is currently trading profitably. The team should re-enter the league in 2018. Staff and players are still employed. The community still has the club. The council have started renting the sporting facilities and also some of the hospitality venues and using them for council functions, which has been an absolute godsend, giving the club a new stream of revenue. And the creditors are way better off than they were before. But these things are only achievable if the board is a united team. Can anyone here remember OneTel? The moment the administrator was called, some of the directors said they'd been profoundly misled. When ASIC hears directors say they've been misled, they drool. Because it means you can get the chairman for keeping the board uninformed. And in OneTel, that chairman was found by consent order to be guilty and to be liable for $20 million of the debts. And shortly afterwards, the CEO was found to have kept the board fully informed of all material information at all relevant times. Oops, that's what happens when a team is disunited. So some of the learnings for me are that you've got to have a plan. You've absolutely got to have a plan. You've got to be looking forwards, not inwards. You must focus on the business and the cash flow as well as on your mission. And I know we're all passionate about our mission, but you've just got to have the money to deliver. Kind of helps. You need good board papers that focus you on the decisions that you have to take. If you need help, you need to know you need help and you need to get it early. And there is no shame in having help. Roger Federer has a tennis coach. I have a board mentor. Everyone I know who is serious about what they do gets help doing it. And the most important thing is if the going gets tough, the tough have to get going. That's all we've got time for today. Obviously, you can go and rape and pillage on my website and help yourselves to any information you desire from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.